Life moves fast, and sometimes we don't get the chance to say what truly matters. But what if we could? What if we had one more coffee, one more embrace, one more chance to speak our truth? Welcome to If I Could Say One More Thing, a podcast where we explore the words left unspoken, the moments we wish we could relive, and the conversations that still linger in our hearts. In each episode, we step into those unfinished conversations, whether through stories, reflections, or heartfelt discussions. Because sometimes, the words we never said are the ones that change us the most. There are moments in life when we long for just one more conversation, one more chance to sit across from someone we've lost, to ask the questions that still linger, to hear the words we never got to hear. For Tomasz, this longing took shape in a story, one he asked me to write, a story where time bends just enough to bring him back to a quiet morning with his mother, wrapped in the familiar scent of warm bread and strong coffee. And in that fleeting space between dreams and waking, a mother and her son share one last coffee, one last moment, where love lingers even as the world calls him back. I knew it was a dream the moment I saw her sitting at the old wooden table, the same one that had been in our family for generations. The grain was worn smooth from years of elbows resting, hands kneading dough, coffee cups tracing lazy circles in the morning light. The kitchen smelled like warm bread and strong coffee, the way it always had when she was alive. She was stirring her cup slowly, the way she always did, letting the steam rise as if reading something in it. "You look exhausted, Sir Czech," she said, glancing up at me from those sharp hazel eyes I had inherited from her, just as she had from her mother. I sighed, dropping into the chair across from her. I just got out of a relationship. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite a frown. "Ah," she said, tilting her head. "That explains the weight." Outside, through the lace curtains, the hills stretched in soft rolls. It had been 20 years since I last sat across from her, 20 years since I had heard her voice outside of my own memory. And yet, here she was, looking exactly the same. Slavic cheekbones, dark waves streaked with silver, hands still strong despite their gentleness. I traced the rim of my cup, staring at the black surface. "It was bad, Mama." She nodded, patient as ever. "Povemi," she whispered. And so I did. I told her how he reminded me of Father, how fragile he was in all the ways that made me smaller, how I had spent so much time trying to hold up a foundation that was cracked before I even stepped onto it. How I thought love was supposed to be hard work, but this felt more like a second job I wasn't getting paid for. She listened, the way she always had, with the kind of stillness that made you believe her words mattered. When I finished, she let the silence settle before speaking. "Mój dragi, you should have left sooner." I let out a weak laugh. "I know." She exhaled through her nose, shaking her head the way she did whenever she wanted to say something more, but didn't want to overwhelm me. "I know why you didn't." I met her gaze. "Because I am an idiot?" Her laugh was soft. "No, Because you have a heart like mine. I frowned. What do you mean? She leaned back, her fingers resting against the warm ceramic of her cup. You know, when I was a little girl, I spent a long time trying to be enough for someone who didn't want me. I swallowed, already knowing where this was going. My father never acknowledged me, she said, her voice steady, not bitter. He knew I was his, but he never wanted to claim me, and for a long time I thought that meant there was something wrong with me, that I had to prove I was worth keeping. I clenched my jaw. Mama. She gave a small shake of her head. It's all right. I had babitsa, and she loved me enough for 2 parents. But those wounds don't disappear. They just change shape. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had packed my school lunches, buttoned my coats, cupped my face when I cried. That's why I worked with children. I wanted to make sure no child ever sat in a room feeling like they were too different, too much, or not enough. I exhaled. You didn't just teach them, Mama. You protected them. She smiled. I tried. And suddenly I understood. And that's why I stayed. I was doing the same thing, trying to protect him from himself. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. But, Surchek, you can't love someone into wholeness. Trust me, I tried. And not just with your father. I let out a weak laugh. I bet you were a hell of a girlfriend before father. She smirked. Oh, I was. I dated a poet once. That was a disaster. I laughed, shaking my head. Then, after a moment, I whispered, I feel ashamed. Her expression softened. Zakai, she asked. For putting up with so much, I answered. For not seeing it sooner. For wasting time on someone who didn't even really love me. She sighed, drumming her fingers lightly against the tabletop. You know what I finally realized about shame? I shook my head. It's just guilt's lazier, meaner cousin. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame says, I am the mistake. She squeezed my hand. And Lubimoy, you are not a mistake. My throat tightened. You loved, she said simply, and that's never something to be ashamed of. You thought if you were patient enough, kind enough, he'd meet you halfway. That's not foolishness. That's just hope. I exhaled, but I should have left sooner. She shrugged. Maybe, but you left, and that's what matters. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had spent her life making sure no one felt the way she had as a child, and yet she had spent so much time proving she was worthy of love that she forgot she didn't have to. Maybe I was doing the same thing. How do I let go of the shame, Mama? I asked. She tilted her head. You forgive the person you were. You thank him for trying. And then you put down the damn baggage and walk away. I swallowed. She smiled, lifting her cup. Nazdroje, to breaking the cycle. I lifted mine too, the warmth spreading through my fingers. To breaking the cycle. And just like that, the kitchen started to fade. The coffee, the table, the scent of cinnamon, all dissolving into the morning light. When I woke up, I felt lighter, like I had had one last coffee with Mama. And this time, I actually listened. The story may have ended, but its echoes remain. The warmth of his mother's words, the weight of their meaning. Tomasz carries them with him now, not as a burden, but as a lesson. A reminder that love should never come at the cost of losing oneself. The story was more than just words on a page. It was a request. Tomasz asked me to write it, to give shape to something deeply personal. His journey, his questions, his longing for one last moment with his mother. For privacy reasons, names have been changed, but the emotions, the struggles, and the heart of this story remain true. And now that he's heard it, we turn to him. Tomasz, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So this story is deeply personal, touching on your relationship with your mother and the emotions surrounding your past relationship. What was it like for you to hear it for the first time?
It's very interesting because a lot of it, as I was listening, I already had thought of, and it was like listening to some inner voice that had already tried to say those things to me. And yet, it was very different at the same time because it wasn't my own voice. It was somebody else's, and it felt like this voice that is not my own gets me, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I totally get it. In fact, sometimes hearing our own experience told back to us can reveal things we hadn't fully processed. Was there anything in the story that made you think differently about your journey?
Well, that's the thing with toxic relationships. You get to a point where you form what you think is quite a clear idea of what's going on. And I think the fact that you don't break the cycle, that you keep moving in that storm or more and more into it, probably means that the idea that you got isn't that clear after all. And then you are left with kind of contradictory thoughts about the relationship once you get out of it. And it's kind of confusing because you blame yourself for having endured so much. And at the same time, you know why you did. And you're not sure anymore whether you're just trying to make it easier for you. So the story, having heard this voice, understanding what I had gone through, well, it made me look at it with kinder eyes occasionally, but then sometimes I was again hard on myself and I didn't know which was more justified. So having heard it and having felt the effect of, okay, this is giving me a reason to look back at it with kinder eyes. It's confirmation and permission to stop being hard on myself, which is pretty much what we need when we try to get back on our feet.
So both the protagonist and the mother loved fragile men who projected their insecurities onto them. Do you see reflections of this in your own life? How did hearing it feel in that regard?
Isn't it funny? If it had happened to somebody else, and technically I've seen people in similar toxic situations, but I didn't necessarily know their history. But also in my mother, as I was growing up and I didn't have a name for it, or I didn't exactly know how to explain it. But then when it starts happening to you, you just don't see how the same pattern is actually applying to your own situation. It took me a minute to realize that it is pretty much the same, is that history is repeating itself. And that's probably the key, realizing the difference. I mean, noticing elements that are familiar because you've seen them in other stories, in other people's situations, and actually realizing, so internalizing, becoming aware that this is it in your case as well. A lot of time can pass between these two phases. So yeah, I definitely noticed. And I think the bitterness that stays with you partly derives from that sense of having wasted so much time. So the time that passes between you collecting the pieces and then actually connecting the dots, all that time, a lot of damage gets done during that time. And then you have to kind of live with it and make sense of it.
In the story, the mother gives warmth, humor, and wisdom, just as mothers often do. But if you could really sit across from her now, what do you think she'd say?
Oh, I think she would say exactly what she says in the story. And she would listen the way the story describes her. I think because you really nailed the essence of what she was. She would say those things, I'm sure, because again, it wouldn't be about her. So that's where she would be full of the right words, the right advice, understanding, everything that she probably wasn't able to tell herself when she was younger, but without trying to. She wouldn't tell me what to do. She would leave it up to me.
So after going through this experience, do you feel like you're in a different place emotionally? Has telling this story helped in any way?
After that experience, I am in a very different place, I have to say. It's not always easy to be aware of it. Sometimes you are very aware. And then you think, again, am I fooling myself? But you're not fooling yourself. Because the moment you think you're in a different place, it's because you are. And then when you wonder whether that's actually true, that's just normal second guessing. Because instinctively, if you feel you're in a better place and in a wiser place, maybe, I think that's because you are. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having those sensations. Oh, I did actually catch myself being almost grateful to life for having put me through that ordeal. And the healing, I realize, I'm not sure how much the story, and again, the voice that brought me to wonder, is the healing so long? Does it take so long because it gets hindered by your own second guessing? And because it's not linear, is it, healing? For a while, you seem like you're over the issues and the sadness and the bitterness. And then it comes back like a tsunami in an even stronger, with even stronger and impactful effects. And then you have to wait for the wave to pass and pull away again. Forgiving yourself simply means realizing that it's okay. There was no other way of going through it. If you see, that's the thing. If you want to go through it, you have to go through it. You can't break out before your time, let's put it that way, because otherwise you haven't gone through it. Going through means from A to B, and B may be very far from A, but there are no shortcuts. That's my point. That's what I realized listening to that conversation in the story.
And if you had the chance to say one more thing to your mother, what would it be?
Interestingly, or quite predictably maybe, being still, the kind person that she brought up, I would start by apologizing, because the one thing she was always telling me was, do not follow my footsteps. And well, I kind of did. So sorry about that. It's not that I never listened to that. It actually always resonated, and I always knew what she was trying to tell me, even though I was too young to fully understand. But on some level, you do know what they're trying to tell you, but it doesn't prevent you from making the same mistakes. And I'm afraid we just have to. It's I think the world's always been spinning that way, hasn't it? Otherwise, this expression wouldn't exist, but it's kind of a stereotype. And then I would say, but it's still okay, don't worry. You've done a good job, I would tell her. I slipped a few times, but that doesn't mean that her teachings were in vain. Quite the opposite. And I would thank her from the bottom of my heart for giving me tools that I may not have understood, or maybe I didn't have them all with me when I needed them, but they were there. And without them, things may have turned out really bad. I came out of it the same person, but slightly wiser and stronger. There's nothing but gratefulness for my mom.
Conversations like this remind us how deeply stories connect us to our past, to our loved ones, and to the lessons we carry forward. Thomas's journey is one of healing, of learning to release the weight of what was and embracing what comes next. And maybe, in some way, it's a journey we all recognize. If this story touched you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, I invite you to share this episode with them. Sometimes, the right words find us exactly when we need them most. And if you have a story of your own, one you wish you could say out loud, one that lingers in your heart, I would love to help you give it a voice. Send me an email at sayonemorethinpod@gmail.com, and together we can craft a story that might bring you the clarity or closure you've been searching for. Make sure to follow If I Could Say One More Thing so you don't miss the next story. Every episode is a chance to sit with a story, reflect, and maybe even say the things we've been holding on to. Thank you for listening, for sharing, and for being part of these conversations that matter. I'm Andrea Applewick, and this is If I Could Say One More Thing.